Hey everyone. So for each map, filter, find and reduce. These are all array methods in JavaScript. Today we will be looking into each of them one by one and writing polyfills from them. Let's start with map. So map method is used to create a new array from an existing one by applying a function to each element of the array. Its syntax looks something like this. You type the name of the array, then dot map and pass it a callback function. This callback function takes three values: the current element, the index of the current element, and the array on which the map function was called upon. Let's understand this with an example. So what we have here is an array with some values in it, and what we want to multiply each element of this array by 5 and create a new array out of it. Let's see how we can do this using map. So we can just write a console.log multiply by 5. Then we'll write the name of the array arr, then dot map. Then we'll pass it a callback function. Let's just name it multiply by 5. I'll declare that function here. So it takes three values: the current element, the index of that current element, and the array on which this function was called upon, which is this arr array. So just to confirm, let me write a console.log and print all these three values here: current value, index, and the array. Let me quickly save this and go to the console. As you can see, these are our array elements. This is the index and this is the array on which this map function was used on. In the output, you are seeing this undefined and undefined because right now we are not returning anything from this function. So let's just return here, return current value multiply by 5. Let's just save this and go to the console. We'll see our output. So for 1 we get 5, for 2 we get 10, and similarly for 12, for 16 and so on. So we get our desired result here. So now we know how map works. Let's quickly move to the polyfill part. So this map function is available to all the arrays in JavaScript. So similarly, the polyfill we are about to write should also be available to each array in JavaScript. So for that we have to attach it to the prototype of the array. Array.prototype. Then the name of our polyfill function, let's just call it myMap. It will be a function. It will take a callback function as an argument. And one thing we know about our myMap function is it will return us a new array. So to store that new array, let's create a variable result. It will be an empty array for now. Now we need to loop through the array on which the myMap function was called upon. So we'll use a for loop for that. We'll say let index equals to 0. Index is less than this dot length and index plus plus. Now we just need to push the result or push the value return from the callback function. We'll just you call the callback function here, callback. Then what parameter does this callback function take? So we checked it here. It takes these three values: the current value, which we can get using this set this set index. Next is the index, and the last is the array, which is just this. So here this points to the array on which myMap function was called upon, which means this points to this arr array. So when we type here this dot length or this at index, we mean arr dot index, arr dot length, or arr at a particular index. Now we just need to return the new array that we have just created. Now if I just copy this one, comment this line, come here and paste it, and instead of map, use our myMap function. Let's just move the console log from here as well. We save it, go back to the browser, we'll see the same result 5, 10, 20, 40, 50, 60, multiplying each value of that array by 5. So this was all about map function. Let's move to for each. So for each method also runs a provided function on each element of the array, but unlike map, it does not return us a new array. The syntax is similar to map. You just type name of the array, then for each and provide it the callback function. The arguments are same, the current element, the index, and the array on which for each is called upon. Let's see it with an example. So let's just say we want to print all these elements from of this ARR array. What we can do, we can just loop through this array ARR or for each. It will take us a callback function. So we will be using the arrow method for this. We'll take a current value, an index, and the whole array. But right now we don't need this index or this array, so we can just remove it. We only need this current value, and what we want to do, we just want to print this current value. So if we save this and go to the console, we can see all these values from of the array are printed one by one. So the only difference between map and for each is that for each does not return us a new array. Now let's move to the polyfill part for each. So similarly, what we did for map, for each will also be a the polyfill for each will also be added to the array prototype. Let's call it my for each. It will also be a function that takes another function as an argument. But unlike map, it will not store any. It will not return us a new array. So no need to create an empty array and store some value in it. We just need to loop through this array, the ARR array, just like what we did for. So all we need to do is loop through the ARR array. So we'll just use a for loop, same as we did in case of map. Let index equals to 0, index is less than this dot length, and index plus plus. Now we are not storing anything, so we'll just call the callback function and we'll pass the parameter that it needs, which is the current value. So we can get it using this at I, the index, sorry, not I, index, the index, and the whole array, which is this. Let's just save this. Now let's just comment this one, copy this here, and instead of for each, let's use my for each. Save it, go to the console, you'll see same result. So this was the polyfill for each. Now let's look at filter. So just like for each and map, filter also apply a callback function on each element of the array, but instead of creating a whole new array, it only returns us those elements which fulfill a specified condition. Let's understand this with an example. So let's say in this array, I only want those elements which are greater than 4, which are this 8, 10 and 12. Let's see how I can do this using the filter method. Let's just write a console.log more than 4. We'll write the name of the array ARR, then the filter method, and then we'll give it a callback function. This callback function will take the same 3 parameter current value, index, and the array. Right now I don't need the index and the whole array, so I just need the current value. And what I want to check that the current value must be greater than 4. So what it will do, it will return to me only those elements which specified this particular condition, which is the current value, the current element must be greater than 4. If it is greater than 4, it will be available in this array. It will be available in the returned array, else not. So if I save it and go to the console, we'll see in the output only 8, 10 and 12, only those values which were more than 4. So now we have seen how filter works. Let's move to its polyfill. So let's just paste the polyfill we wrote for map function, and instead of my map, name it my filter. Everything will be same, but instead of pushing all the elements, all the computation in the result array, we want to check if for that particular value the callback function return true or false. So we'll call the callback function using this at index, provided it the index and the whole array using this. And if this callback function returns true, only then we want to push the that particular element to our result array. So let's just quickly go through again what we did here. So we created an empty array to store the result. We loop through the ARR array. Again here this points to this ARR array. We loop through the array and we check if this callback function returns true for a particular element at that index. Okay, let's just quickly go through what we did up to now. So we created an empty array to store the result. We loop through the ARR array. Again, this points to this ARR array. We loop through this ARR array and we check if the callback function returns true for it. So if this condition return true for the this at index element, only then we'll push that element to the result array and then we'll return that array. So if I copy it from here and paste this line here, comment the above one, and here instead of filter, use my filter, save it and go to the console. Again, we'll see the same result. So this was the polyfill for my filter. Now let's move to the find function. The find method and the filter method works kind of similar in a way, but the difference is the filter method return us a full array, but find method only return us a single element or the first element that satisfy the condition of the callback function. So let's use our previous example. So what we want the element which is greater than 4. So if we use find method for that, let's see what will be the output. So if we write console.log more than 4 and the name of the array, then find, provided a callback function, same arguments as before. We'll just use the current value and we provided a condition that the current value must be greater than 4. So if we save this and go to the browser, we'll see more than 4 only prints 8. So it prints only the first element here. It's right out the first element which was fulfilling this condition. The current values should be greater than 4. So the first element which was fulfilling this condition, it returns only that single value. So now let's write a polyfill for it. Similarly, add it to the prototype of array. Let's call it my find. It will be a function that takes a callback function as a parameter. Now let's just quickly loop through the array. Let index equals to 0. Index should be less than this dot length. Index plus plus. Now we check if the callback function returns true for this particular, for the element at this particular index, which is this at index. Other arguments are the index and the whole array. Now if this condition returns true, then instead of storing it somewhere, we just return this element. So what we are doing here, we are looping through the ARR array, and as soon as for any element this callback function returns true, we return that particular element. Now if I copy this line, paste it here, comment the above one, and instead of find, use my find, save it, go to the console, we'll see again the same output. So this was the find function. Now let's move to our last method, that is the reduce method. So reduce method is a bit different from all the methods we've seen up to now. So reduce method, what it does, it reduces an array of values down to one value. Same as map, filter, and for each, it also applies a callback function on each value of the array, but its syntax is a bit different. So what we have to use is write the name of the array, type the name of the function reduce, then it takes two arguments. First is this callback function and an initial value. The callback function contains few things: the accumulator, a current value or the current element, the index of this current element, and the array on which the reduce method was called upon. So let's understand this with an example. What it means, it reduces down the array to a single value. Let's say what we want to do, we want to add all the elements of the array and we want to have a total sum of it. So what we can do, we can use the reduce method for that, like this sum. Then we'll type arr, name of the function reduce, pass it a callback function, and an initial value. So for now the initial value will be, let's say, 0. The callback function will take the following things: accumulator, the current value, the index, and the whole array, which is this arr. And what it does, it add one by one all the elements of the array, all the values from the array, and store it inside the accumulator. So let me just quickly walk through what this particular line is doing. So we call the reduce function, we pass it a callback method, and what this callback function is doing is it's looping through the arr array, and one by one this value contains one by one all the elements, all the values from this arr array. One by one all these values are coming and getting added to this accumulator variable, and one by one these values will be added to the accumulator, and at last this accumulator will be returned as a result or as the output. So if we save this and go check in the console, we'll see the output as 37, which is the sum of all the elements, all the values in this array. Okay, so now we have seen what reduce function does. Let's write it polyfill. Okay, so similarly, just add the function name to the prototype of array. Let's call it my reduce. It will be a function. Now it will take two things: a callback function, and an initial value. Now, first initialize the accumulator with initial value. So we'll create a variable, let's call it accumulator, and assign it the value initial value. Now we'll iterate through all the elements of the ARR array using a for loop. This dot length index plus plus. Now we'll assign the accumulator the result of the callback function, which is this, the value returned from the callback function. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, like if in any scenario the user fails to give the initial value, this initial value, let's say he didn't pass any value to it. So in that particular case, the first value of the array will act as the initial value for the accumulator. So what will happen is we'll check if the accumulator already exists, then we'll just call the callback function, and whatever value it returns will be stored in there. Just passed all the arguments, the accumulator and the current value, the index, and the whole ARR array. And if in case the accumulator doesn't have an initial value, what we'll do, we'll assign this at I as the initial value. That means the first element. Now at last what we'll do, we'll just return the accumulator. So let's just quickly go through what we did here. So first we initialize the accumulator with an initial value, and if in case, then we iterate over through the ARR array using a for loop. And if in case user fails to provide an initial value to the accumulator gets the first element of the array as initial value, and from second loop, or when the loop goes second time, the accumulator pick the value. The accumulator will already have a value, so it will pick the next value from the callback function, the value returned from this callback function, and at last we just return this accumulator. So now we just copy this line, comment the above one, instead of reduce, use my reduce, save it, go to the console. It's saying I is not defined. I okay, where have I, oh sorry, instead of I it will be index, sorry. Yeah, let's save this, go to the console, save. Yeah, so it is returning us all the sum, it is returning us the sum of all the elements, all the values in the array. So this was all about for each map, find, filter and reduce function and their polyfills. Hope you like the video. The source code will be available in the description. Thank you for watching.